If you like this story, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next exciting stories. And now let's enjoy the story.
The battlefield was chaos, a deafening storm of gunfire, sand, and screams. The desert wind howled, carrying the stench of burning metal and sweat, while the ground trembled beneath the relentless pounding of artillery. In the heart of this hell stood Sergeant Nathan Carter, his pulse hammering as he ducked behind the crumbling remains of a mud brick wall, blood trickling down his temple. His unit had been ambushed. The enemy had predicted their route, cutting them off, trapping them like wounded animals in a cage. But Nathan wasn't alone. Beside him, tense and alert, his fur matted with dirt and blood, was Thor, the German shepherd who had saved his life more times than Nathan could count. Thor's chest heaved, his ears flicking in every direction, scanning the battlefield with an intelligence no human could replicate. His golden brown eyes burned with focus. The distant sound of a cocking rifle sent a ripple through his muscular frame, his body low to the ground, ready to strike like a coiled spring. Then, a sound, so subtle, so nearly imperceptible, that no man could have heard it. But Thor did. A click. Thor lunged without hesitation, slamming into Nathan's chest just as the IED beneath their feet detonated. The explosion swallowed the air, hurling dust and fire into the sky. Nathan felt himself being thrown backward, the searing heat licking his skin. The sound was muffled, like being submerged underwater. His vision blurred as he hit the ground hard, pain splitting through his ribs. But the only thing he could think about was Thor. Thor! The dust settled, revealing a nightmarish sight. Thor lay sprawled on his side, blood seeping from a gash along his flank, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Nathan scrambled to his knees, ignoring his own injuries, his hands trembling as he reached for his partner. Thor's breath was labored, his massive body rising and falling in shuddering gasps. But still, when their eyes met, Thor's tail thumped once, weak but full of unwavering loyalty. "You stupid brave son of a gun," Nathan whispered, his voice breaking, cradling Thor's head in his lap. Gunfire erupted again, snapping Nathan back into survival mode. He could hear shouting, his unit regrouping, trying to fight their way out. They were still in danger. But Thor had done his job. He had saved his handler from certain death. Again. "Medic!" Nathan roared, his voice raw. "I need a medic for my dog." Most people didn't understand. To them, a military working dog was just an asset, a tool of war, a piece of equipment. But to Nathan, Thor was his brother in arms. Thor bled for him, fought for him, lived for him. And as Nathan watched his best friend struggle for breath, he made a vow. He would never leave Thor behind. Not in the desert, not in war, not anywhere. But war does not care for loyalty. The medics arrived, working fast to stabilize Thor. They didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. They knew what Thor had done, knew that this dog had more courage than most men. They loaded him onto a stretcher, rushing him toward the evacuation chopper. Nathan tried to follow, but the pain in his ribs stole his breath, and before he knew it, the world went black. When he woke up, he was in a hospital in Germany. His body was bandaged, bruised, but alive. And the first thing he asked was, "Where's Thor?" They wouldn't give him a straight answer. Days turned into weeks as Nathan fought to recover, haunted by the memory of that explosion, by the way Thor had sacrificed himself without hesitation. He sent requests, appeals, demands to the military to know Thor's status, but all he got was bureaucratic silence. Then, after months of waiting, he finally got his answer. Thor had survived, but he was no longer his dog. The military deemed Thor too valuable to retire, despite his injuries. They patched him up and reassigned him, sending him back into service with another handler, as if the years he had spent at Nathan's side meant nothing. Nathan had been discharged, his injuries making it impossible for him to continue his career as a soldier. He had given everything to his country, his blood, his body, his brothers, and his best friend. He had lost men in war. He had seen death up close. But this injustice was a different kind of grief. They had taken Thor from him, and Nathan Carter swore he would get him back. Nathan Carter had fought his entire life, first for his country, then for his own survival. But now, the battle was different. It wasn't against an enemy on the battlefield. It wasn't against the searing pain in his body that still flared up when the weather changed. It was against the very system he had sworn to protect. It had been nearly a year since that explosion. A year since Thor had saved his life and had been ripped away from him as if their bond meant nothing. A year of filling out endless forms, making phone calls, meeting with military officials, only to be met with cold, bureaucratic rejection at every turn. Sergeant Carter, we understand your concern, but military working dogs are classified as government property. Thor is still deemed fit for duty and remains an active asset. An asset, that's what they called him. Not a partner, not a hero. An asset. Nathan clenched his jaw, staring at the email response on his laptop. His hands trembled as he typed back, his fingers hammering the keys. Thor saved my life. He is not a piece of equipment. He deserves a home, not another deployment. But deep down, Nathan already knew what they would say. It didn't matter. The military didn't care about loyalty. Not when there was still a war to fight. He had tried everything, calling in favors from old commanders, speaking to the press, even reaching out to animal rights organizations. But all he ever got was the same soulless response. Thor is still in active service. He cannot be released. But then he heard a rumor. Late one night, scrolling through forums where veterans shared their experiences, he stumbled across a chilling post from another ex-handler. They don't retire the dogs like they should. If they can't deploy them anymore, they either send them to labs for testing or put them down quietly. No ceremony, no goodbyes. Nathan's breath caught in his throat, his hands tightened into fists. No way. That couldn't be true. He knew the military could be ruthless, but not like this, not to the same dogs who had given everything. But the thought wouldn't leave him. What if Thor was injured again? What if they decided he wasn't fit for duty anymore? Would they just dispose of him? Like broken equipment? He couldn't sleep that night. The nightmares came back, explosions, gunfire, the screams of his men. And Thor, always Thor, pulling him from danger, standing in front of bullets, bleeding but never backing down. But in the dream, Nathan couldn't reach him. He was stuck behind a chain-link fence, watching as men in uniforms dragged Thor away, disappearing into darkness. Nathan woke up in a cold sweat, his hands gripping the sheet so hard his knuckles turned white. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He had to act now. The breaking point, a desperate plan. Nathan's last hope was an old friend from the military, a former K-9 handler named James Holloway. James had been through the same fight before. Years ago, when his own MWD partner had aged out of service, the military had refused to let him adopt the dog. But James had done what Nathan hadn't considered yet. He had gone to court. They met in a dingy diner just outside of Fort Bragg, the kind of place where old soldiers went to swap war stories and drink bad coffee. James looked at him over the rim of his cup, his weathered face unreadable. "You want to sue the government?" His voice was flat, as if he had heard something insane. "If that's what it takes." Nathan's hands curled into fists on the table. "I'll do whatever I have to. His voice broke for a second. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to stay calm. "I just want my dog back." James sighed, rubbing his hand over his face. "You sure you're ready for this? You're going up against the system, Nate. They don't like guys like us making trouble. They'll fight you every step of the way." Nathan knew. He knew this wouldn't be easy. But he had spent a year drowning in hopelessness. He had spent a year being told no at every turn. But Thor didn't give up on him that day in the desert. And Nathan wasn't about to give up on Thor. The legal battle begins, fighting against injustice. It took months. Months of filing paperwork, gathering evidence, reaching out to veterans' rights organizations. James helped him find a lawyer, a fierce woman named Caroline Diaz who had made a career out of fighting for soldiers and their service animals. The military tried to stonewall them at every turn. They wouldn't release Thor's records. They claimed national security concerns. They even accused Nathan of interfering with active duty operations. But Nathan didn't back down. He sat through court hearings, staring down military officials in crisp uniforms who tried to tell him that Thor belonged to the government, that he was still useful. Nathan stood up in that courtroom, his voice shaking with emotion, but strong with conviction. "You say Thor is government property," he said, his fists clenched at his sides. "Then tell me, who gave him his scars? Who carried him on my back when he was shot? Who woke up with him every night when the nightmares came? Who held him in the desert, whispering that it was going to be okay?" He took a slow breath, his chest rising and falling. The entire courtroom was silent. He is not property. He is my family, and I will not let you throw him away. For the first time in months, Nathan saw something in their faces. Doubt. But just as the case was about to take a turn in his favor, he received a phone call that made his blood run cold. Thor had been removed from duty. Nathan's heart slammed against his ribs. They had pulled him from service, but not to retire him. He was gone, disappeared, just like the rumors said. And in that moment, Nathan knew the fight wasn't just about adoption anymore. It was about saving Thor's life. Nathan felt like he was drowning. The moment he heard Thor had been removed from duty, his entire world spun. His breathing turned shallow, his hands gripping the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Where is he?" His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper, but the weight behind it was crushing. On the other end of the call, Caroline hesitated. That single pause, that tiny hesitation, sent a shiver down Nathan's spine. "They won't tell me," she admitted, frustration and urgency laced in every word. "I've called every contact I have, pulled every legal card I could, but they keep saying he's no longer an active military asset. That's all they'll give me." Nathan's stomach twisted. He could barely breathe. No longer an active asset. That was just a sanitized way of saying Thor was disposable now. "Do you know what this means, Nate?" James's voice cut through the fog of Nathan's panic. He had been listening, arms crossed, his face grim. "They're not just retiring him. They're making him disappear." Nathan slammed his fist against the table, rattling the empty coffee cup in front of him. "I need to know where he is," he growled. His voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. "Because I swear to God, if they so much as touch a hair on his head." "We're already on it," Caroline interrupted, her voice firm. "I have some contacts looking into the transport records for decommissioned K9 units. If they moved Thor, there's going to be a paper trail." "But Nathan," she hesitated again. "What?" he demanded. She exhaled heavily. "If he's already been taken to one of the disposal sites, we might not have much time." Nathan's vision darkened at the edges. Disposal sites. That's what they called them. His best friend, his partner, thrown away like garbage. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Not on my watch." For the next 48 hours, Nathan, James, and Caroline worked relentlessly. No sleep, no breaks, just pure desperation and fury driving them forward. Caroline pulled strings in the legal world, James dug through old military contacts, and Nathan made call after call demanding answers from anyone who would pick up. Finally, a breakthrough. "I found him." Caroline's voice trembled on the other end of the line. "Nathan, I found Thor, but it's bad." Nathan's stomach dropped. "Tell me." She hesitated, then sighed. "He was transferred to a facility in Texas, one of the ones they use for old military working dogs." "A retirement home?" Nathan asked, hope flickering for the first time. Maybe it wasn't as bad as he thought. Maybe Thor was safe. "No," Caroline cut in sharply. "Not retirement, it's a euthanasia site." The room tilted. Nathan gripped the edge of the table, trying to stay upright. "They put them down, Nate. No ceremony, no chance of adoption. They just line them up and euthanize them." Nathan's breath hitched, his throat tightened, his heart felt like it had been ripped from his chest. Thor wasn't just at risk, he was on death row. They had less than 24 hours before Thor's scheduled euthanasia. There was no time to go through the courts, no time for legal maneuvers. Nathan, James, and Caroline knew exactly what they had to do. "We're going in." James glanced at him. "You sure you're up for this?" Nathan's jaw tightened. His body was broken, but his will was unshakable. "I didn't survive a war just to lose my best friend in some goddamn lab," he said coldly. "We're getting him out." The plan was reckless, dangerous, borderline insane, but Nathan didn't care. He was getting Thor back, no matter what it took. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes every breath feel stolen. Nathan sat in the back of the van, his hands clenched into fists as they sped toward the facility. His mind raced with the horrifying image of Thor locked in a cold cage, unaware that death was coming for him. James tightened his grip on the wheel, his face a mask of grim determination. Caroline sat beside him, typing furiously on a laptop, trying to override security logs. "I managed to pull the blueprints for the facility," she announced, voice tense. "They keep the dogs in a separate wing before euthanasia. If we time it right, We can slip in before the morning shift change. Nathan barely nodded. His focus was on one thing and one thing only: Thor, his partner, his family, his lifeline. They couldn't be too late. They wouldn't be too late. The van screeched to a halt outside the unmarked building in rural Texas. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a storage warehouse, a place where things went to be forgotten. Nathan knew better. This was where military heroes were erased from existence. James cut the engine. The three of them moved quickly, slipping into the shadows. Caroline kept her head low, glancing at her watch. "We have exactly 18 minutes before the next security sweep," she whispered. "If we're still inside after that, we're screwed." Nathan nodded. His body burned with the remnants of past wounds, but the pain didn't matter. Only Thor mattered. James pulled out a crowbar and wedged it beneath the service door. With a grunt, he yanked it open. The three of them slipped inside, swallowed by the darkness. The stench hit Nathan immediately, a sickening mix of disinfectant, fear, and death. Rows of kennels stretched down the warehouse, each one holding a dog, once fierce, once proud, now abandoned and waiting for the inevitable. A soft whimper echoed. Nathan's breath caught. Thor. Nathan all but ran down the row of kennels, scanning every cage desperately. And then he saw him. Thor was curled in the corner of a rusted cage, his once mighty body weakened, his fur dull and dirty. The scars on his legs, the graying fur around his muzzle, battle-worn, proud, and utterly broken. The dog who had once charged into gunfire without hesitation now lay trembling on a thin, urine-stained blanket. Nathan's vision blurred with rage and grief. His chest burned as if someone had driven a knife through it. "Thor," he whispered, his voice raw. At first there was no reaction. Then, slowly, Thor lifted his head. Their eyes met. And in that moment, something inside Nathan snapped. This wasn't just wrong, it was evil. Thor recognized him, but he didn't move. He was too weak. That was when Nathan saw it. A yellow tag clipped to the front of the cage. Euthanasia scheduled 5 a.m. Nathan couldn't breathe. Thor had less than an hour. "James, get this door open," he barked, his voice shaking with urgency. James was already moving, wedging the crowbar into the lock. "Come on, big guy," Nathan murmured, reaching through the bars to touch Thor's matted fur. "I'm here. You're coming home." Thor's tail moved, just barely, but it moved, he knew. The lock snapped open. James yanked the kennel door wide. Nathan lunged forward, wrapping his arms around Thor, lifting his broken body into his lap. Thor let out a weak sigh, his body pressing into Nathan's chest, a silent confirmation that he was still fighting. "We have to move," Caroline hissed. "Now." Then, the alarms exploded. A red light flashed over the entrance. A loud siren howled, shattering the silence. Nathan cursed. "They knew we were coming," James spat. "No," Caroline's eyes widened. Someone tipped them off. A betrayal. They had been set up. Thor's death had been planned. And they weren't supposed to walk out of here alive. The sound of boots thundered down the hallway. Nathan's grip on Thor tightened. "Then we fight our way out," he growled. The blaring sirens pierced the air, sending shockwaves of panic through the facility. The once silent, eerie warehouse now transformed into a battlefield. But this time, Nathan just fighting for his country, he was fighting for Thor's life. He hoisted the weak, battle-worn German shepherd into his arms, feeling the slight rise and fall of Thor's ribs against his chest. Too shallow. Too weak. Nathan gritted his teeth. Thor was barely holding on. "Move," James barked, raising his gun as the first set of guards rushed in from the far end of the hallway. The sharp crack of gunfire erupted through the air, bullets ricocheting off the metal walls. Nathan shielded Thor with his body as James returned fire, forcing the guards to retreat momentarily. Caroline grabbed Nathan's arm, her voice panicked. "We have to go now. They'll call in backup." "Which way?" Nathan demanded, his mind a flurry of calculations. Every second wasted was a second closer to Thor's death. Caroline's fingers flew across her tablet, scanning the blueprints she had stolen. "Emergency exit at the back, but it's locked down. We need a clearance code." "Screw that," James cut in. "We'll make our own exit." They sprinted down the long corridor, Thor limp in Nathan's arms. Every step sent daggers of pain through his body, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. They burst into an open area, a dimly lit room lined with more kennels, more dogs, more discarded heroes. Nathan's stomach twisted in fury. How many of them had given everything, only to be thrown away like garbage? But before he could think further, a slow clap echoed through the room. Nathan stopped cold. A shadow emerged from the far side. A man in a suit, flanked by 2 guards, his smirk dripping with malice. "I was wondering how far you'd get, Sergeant," the man mused, his tone laced with mockery. "And here I thought you were a broken soldier. Looks like you still have some fight left." Nathan's hands shook with rage. He knew that voice. General Malcolm Pierce. The same man who had fought to have the K-9 units classified as equipment instead of soldiers. The same man who had argued that Thor was government property, not a sentient being. The same man who had signed the euthanasia order. "You," Nathan spat, his voice filled with pure venom. Pierce's smirk widened. "You didn't think we'd just let you waltz in here and take back our asset, did you?" His eyes flickered to Thor, still cradled in Nathan's arms. "A shame. We had other plans for him." Nathan's blood ran cold. "What plans?" Pierce's smirk didn't fade. "Let's just say some very powerful people would pay top dollar for a war-trained K-9. The black market has an insatiable demand for such creatures." Nathan's vision blurred with rage. Not just discarded, not just erased, sold, used, tortured, like he never mattered. Nathan's hands clenched so hard his nails dug into his palms, his chest heaved with fury. "You think I'm gonna let that happen?" he growled, stepping forward. Pierce chuckled. "I think you don't have a choice." The guards raised their weapons. Nathan barely had time to react before bullets tore through the air. James lunged first, firing shots as he dove for cover. The room erupted into chaos, gunfire, barking, shouting. Nathan hit the floor, shielding Thor with his body as bullets rained down around them. "Cover me," he shouted, his heart racing. "Thor can't take another hit." James rolled out from behind a crate, taking out 1 guard with a clean shot to the leg. The man collapsed, screaming. "Move," Caroline yelled, pulling at Nathan's arm. Nathan pushed himself up, clutching Thor. His entire body burned. His old war injuries screamed in protest, but he ran. Thor let out a weak whimper, his eyes fluttering open. "Stay with me, buddy," Nathan begged. They barreled toward the exit door. James fired at the control panel, blasting the lock open. "Go, go, go!" Nathan pushed through, stumbling into the cold night air. Behind them, Pierce roared in fury. "You can't run forever, Carter." Nathan didn't stop. They sprinted to the waiting van, James jumping into the driver's seat. The tires screeched as they tore out of the compound. "They'll come after us," Caroline warned, frantically typing on her tablet. Nathan didn't care. His entire focus was on the dying dog in his arms. "Thor, stay with me," he whispered, his throat thick with emotion. Thor blinked up at him, his body trembling, and then his eyes fluttered closed. "No," Nathan choked out. "No, no, no." Thor's body went limp. Nathan's world stopped. The van flew down the highway, James shouting into the radio, calling the emergency vet. Nathan pressed his forehead against Thor's, his tears falling onto the dog's fur. "Please," he begged, his voice breaking. "Please don't go. For everything Thor had done. For every bullet he had taken. For every mission he had fought. For every moment he had saved Nathan from himself. He deserved more. He deserved to live." "I love you, buddy," Nathan whispered. And then Thor took a breath. A shallow, ragged breath. Nathan's head snapped up. "He's breathing!" James slammed on the gas. "Hold on, Thor," Nathan whispered. "You're not done yet." They weren't just running for survival anymore. They were racing against death itself. The van roared through the night, its tires screeching against the asphalt as James floored the gas pedal. The emergency vet was still miles away, but every second felt like a lifetime. Nathan clutched Thor's limp body, his fingers digging into the German Shepherd's fur as if he could physically keep his soul from slipping away. "Stay with me, buddy," Nathan pleaded, his voice raw. His hands trembled as he pressed against the wound on Thor's side, trying to slow the bleeding. But Thor wasn't moving. Caroline kept her eyes on the GPS, barking updates in rapid succession. 4 minutes out, we're almost there." Nathan barely heard her. His world was reduced to the shallow, irregular breaths of his dying partner. "You've survived worse," Nathan whispered. "You got me through hell, remember? You don't quit on me now, soldier. Not now." For a moment there was nothing. Then a weak twitch of Thor's paw. Nathan let out a broken laugh, clutching him tighter. "That's it, buddy," he murmured. "Keep fighting." James swerved hard into the emergency vet's parking lot, tires screeching to a halt. Before the van had even fully stopped, Nathan shoved the door open, his body screaming in pain as he stumbled out with Thor in his arms. "Help!" he roared, his voice echoing into the night. The clinic doors burst open, and a team of vet techs rushed forward. A young vet sprinted toward him, her eyes going wide at the sight of the bleeding dog in Nathan's arms. "Get him inside," she shouted, motioning to her team. Nathan followed them through the doors, but when he tried to step past the threshold into the surgical room, a nurse blocked his way. "I'm sorry, sir, you can't come in." Nathan's heart lurched. No. We need to stabilize him," the vet said firmly. "Let us work." They pried Thor from his arms. Nathan felt like a part of his soul was being ripped away. Then the doors slammed shut, and he was left outside, waiting, helpless. Nathan sank into the chair, his head in his hands. James and Caroline sat beside him, silent as the clock ticked mercilessly on. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2, then 3. Each second was torture. James nudged Nathan's shoulder, offering a cup of coffee, but Nathan shook his head. He couldn't eat. He couldn't drink. He couldn't think past the image of Thor lying on that table, cut open, bleeding, barely breathing. "He's a fighter," Caroline murmured. "If anyone can pull through, it's him." Nathan said nothing, because this wasn't just about survival. If Thor made it, what then? Would the government still come after him? Would they still try to take him away, claim him as government property like a discarded machine? Would they still try to kill him? Nathan clenched his fists. "I won't let them," he swore under his breath. "I don't care what it takes. I won't let them take him." The doors finally opened. The vet emerged, her scrubs covered in blood. Nathan shot to his feet. "Is he?" The vet wiped her forehead, exhaling. "He made it through surgery." Nathan's chest collapsed with relief. "But," she continued, and his stomach clenched, "he's not out of danger yet. He lost a lot of blood. His organs were under severe stress. The next 24 hours are critical." "Can I see him?" She hesitated. "He's on oxygen. He's sedated. He might not wake up for a while." "I don't care," Nathan rasped. "I need to see him." She nodded. "Follow me." Nathan stepped into the dimly lit recovery room. And there he was. Thor lay motionless on the table, wires and tubes connected to his fragile body. His breathing was slow, shallow, a bandage wrapped tightly around his abdomen. His fur was stained with dried blood. Nathan's throat tightened. He limped forward, sinking to his knees beside the table. He didn't care about the pain in his own body anymore. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his fingers brushing against Thor's fur. There was no response. Nathan swallowed past the lump in his throat. "You did good, soldier," he said softly. "Better than I ever could have asked for. You saved my life. More times than I can count." His vision blurred with tears. "Now let me save you." Thor's paw twitched slightly. Nathan squeezed it. "I'm right here," he whispered. "I won't leave. I won't let them take you. Not now, not ever." Thor's breathing remained slow. But for the first time since he was pulled off that battlefield, Nathan swore he saw the faintest movement of his tail. Outside the clinic, black SUVs pulled into the parking lot. Nathan's gut turned ice cold. James cursed. "We've got company." Pierce had come for Thor. "They're not taking him," Nathan said, his voice dark. "Not without a fight." Caroline's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, then looked up with wide eyes. "Nathan, we went viral." He frowned. "What?" She turned the screen toward him. Live footage, thousands of people watching. Nathan's courtroom battle. The moment Thor sensed danger, the exposure of the illegal canine euthanasia program, the world was watching. "They can't cover this up now," Caroline whispered. Nathan's pulse thundered. This wasn't just about Thor anymore. This was about every dog who had been thrown away. Every hero who had been forgotten. Every soldier who had given everything, only to be treated like trash. The truth was out. Now the world would decide what happened next. Nathan looked down at Thor, still fighting for his life. "We're gonna win this, buddy," he murmured. "For you, for all of them." And outside, the war for justice was just beginning. Outside the clinic, the night air was heavy with tension. The black SUVs sat idling, their tinted windows hiding the men inside. Nathan, still kneeling beside Thor, felt his heartbeat drum against his ribs. "They're here," James muttered, his voice low, "and they're not leaving empty-handed." Caroline's grip tightened around her phone, her face pale. "We need a plan, now." Nathan exhaled sharply, his soldier instincts kicking in. There was no running, no hiding, not anymore. "We fight?" he said simply. James shot him a look. You're half dead, she's a journalist, and your dog is unconscious. Fight with what, exactly? Nathan turned toward the clinic doors. The truth. The first SUV door opened, then the second. Men in black suits stepped out, federal agents, but not the kind who cared about justice. Their presence was cold, calculated, and leading them, stepping out last, was Pierce. Nathan clenched his jaw. The sight of the man made his blood boil. Pierce adjusted the cuffs of his expensive suit, walking forward with all the arrogance of a man who thought he had already won. Sergeant Carter, Pierce greeted smoothly, as if they were old friends instead of sworn enemies. Hand over the dog. You know how this ends. Nathan straightened, his pain forgotten. Yeah, I do, and it's not ending with you taking him. A smirk tugged at Pierce's lips. You don't have a choice. I always have a choice. Pierce sighed, shaking his head. Then he motioned to the agents. Take the dog. The moment the words left his mouth, everything exploded into motion. James moved first. With a grunt of effort, he shouldered into the nearest agent, sending the man stumbling backward. Caroline, get inside, Nathan barked. But Caroline wasn't running. She was filming. The world was watching this live. The government is trying to take an injured hero dog from his wounded veteran handler, she shouted into the camera. Look at this. Look at the injustice. One agent lunged for Nathan, but James intercepted, knocking him back with a powerful shove. Get inside, damn it, James growled. Not a chance. Caroline shot back. The scene was chaos. The agents were trained fighters, but so were James and Nathan, and they had nothing left to lose. Nathan gritted his teeth through the pain, throwing a punch that sent one agent staggering. Another grabbed at him, but Nathan drove his elbow hard into the man's ribs, knocking the breath out of him. But it wasn't enough. They were outnumbered. Pierce stood back, watching with mild amusement. Enough, he snapped. One agent drew his weapon. Caroline screamed. Don't you dare, Nathan roared. The agent hesitated, because behind Nathan, a low, rumbling growl filled the air. Thor was awake. Weak but determined, Thor pushed himself up from the metal table. His breathing was labored, but his eyes, those fierce, unwavering eyes, burned with fury. The moment Nathan turned and saw him standing, his throat tightened. Thor? The German shepherd locked eyes with his handler. Then he bared his teeth at the agents. The men hesitated. Even trained professionals knew, you do not engage a canine trained for war. Thor staggered forward. He was in pain, still weak, but it didn't matter. He was still a soldier. Pierce's expression flickered with unease. Put him down. Nathan's blood ran cold. The agent raised his gun. Then, a deafening explosion of barking. Thor lunged. Fangs sank into the agent's arm. The gun clattered to the ground. The agent let out a strangled cry, trying to shake the dog off. Nathan surged forward, grabbing the gun before another agent could. Stand down, he shouted, aiming it at Pierce. The agents froze. Pierce's smirk was gone. Thor released the agent, stepping back, blood staining his teeth. His legs trembled, but he still stood tall beside Nathan. You lose, Nathan growled, and the whole world was watching. Caroline had captured everything. Pierce knew it. For the first time, he looked nervous. This is assault on federal officers, he snapped, trying to regain control. You have no idea what you've done. Nathan's smile was cold. No, Pierce, you have no idea what you've done. Caroline shoved her phone screen in Pierce's face. This is being live-streamed to 1 million people right now, she hissed. Do you think the public is going to be okay with the military stealing a dying war hero from his handler? Pierce's face drained of color. Checkmate. By morning, the footage had gone viral. Outrage spread across the country. Veterans, animal lovers, soldiers, everyone was furious. Congress was forced to act. Pierce was placed under investigation. The government's euthanasia program for retired canines, exposed and dismantled. And most importantly, Nathan officially won full custody of Thor. When the papers were signed, Nathan sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. Relief, exhaustion, gratitude. Thor, still recovering, nudged his leg. Nathan chuckled, running his fingers through the German shepherd's fur. You did it, buddy. We did it. Thor wagged his tail. For the first time in too long, he was home. Nathan and Caroline sat together weeks later, recording a final message for the world. This isn't just about Thor, Nathan said. It's about every canine who gave their life, only to be treated like disposable tools. Caroline nodded. No more secrets, no more cover-ups. These dogs are heroes, and they deserve justice. Nathan placed a hand on Thor's back. If you care about these war heroes, don't stay silent. Share their stories. Fight for them, because they fought for us. The video ended, and the fight for justice continued.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please support me by clicking the logo in the bottom right corner to subscribe to my channel. This way you won't miss any of the exciting stories coming up. Thank you so much.